Good Tuesday afternoon. So I'm going to switch to uploading in the afternoons just because it's a little easier to do that. It takes a lot of pressure off having to wake up early to upload. That way I can just kind of upload while I'm at work. So today we're on Psalm 37. So Psalm 37 is called Instruction in Wisdom. Now oh my gosh, this is a long one. So let's start. Do not be agitated by evildoers. Do not envy those who do wrong, for they wither quickly like grass and wilt like tender green plants. Trust in the Lord and do what is good. Dwell in the land and live securely. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desires. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act, making your righteousness shine like the dawn, your justice like the noonday. Be silent before the Lord and wait expectantly for him. Do not be agitated by one who prospers in his way, by the person who carries out evil plans. Refrain from anger and give up your rage. Do not be agitated, it can only bring harm. For evildoers will be destroyed, but those who put their hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while and a wicked person will be no more. Though you look for him, he will not be there. But the humble will inherit the land and will enjoy abundant prosperity. The wicked person schemes against the righteous and gnashes his teeth at him. The Lord laughs at him because he sees that his day is coming. The wicked have drawn the sword and strung the bow to bring down the poor and needy, and to slaughter those whose way is upright. Their swords will enter their own hearts, and their bows will be broken. The little that the righteous person has is better than the abundance of many wicked people. For the arms of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord supports the righteous. The Lord watches over the blameless all their days, and their inheritance will last forever. They will not be disgraced in times of adversity. They will be satisfied in days of hunger. But the wicked will perish. The Lord's enemies, like the glory of the pastures, will fade away. They will fade away like smoke. The wicked person borrows and does not repay, but the righteous one is gracious and giving. Those who are blessed by the Lord will inherit the land, but those who are cursed by him, will be destroyed. A person's steps are established by the Lord, and he takes pleasure in his way. Though he falls, he will not be overwhelmed, because the Lord supports him with his hand. I have been young, and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous abandoned, or his children begging for bread. He is always generous, always lending, and his children are a blessing. Turn away from evil, do what is good, and settle permanently. For the Lord loves justice, and will not abandon his faithful ones. They are kept safe forever, but the children of the wicked will be destroyed. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it permanently. The mouth of the righteous utters wisdom, his tongue speaks what is just. The instruction of his God is in his heart. His steps do not falter. The wicked one lies in wait for the righteous and intends to kill him. The Lord will not leave him in the power of the wicked one, or allow him to be condemned when he is judged. Wait for the Lord and keep his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. You will watch when the wicked are destroyed. I have seen a wicked, violent person, well rooted like a flourishing native tree. Then I passed by and noticed he was gone. I searched for him, but he could not be found. Watch the blameless and observe the upright, for the person of peace will have a future, but transgressors will all be eliminated. The future of the wicked will be destroyed. The salvation of the righteous is from the Lord, their refuge in a time of distress. The Lord helps and delivers them. He will deliver them from the wicked and will save them, because they take refuge in him. That was a long psalm, but Psalm 37 is honestly one of my personal, just all-time favorite psalms in all of the psalms. And it really kind of speaks to what we're talking about here, because right over here it says, let's see, where was it at? Let's see. Right here, this is verse 23. A person's steps are established by the Lord, and he takes pleasure in his way. Now, this Bible doesn't have any capitalized divine pronouns, but if you do have a Bible that has capitalized divine pronouns, you're probably going to find that where it says, and he takes pleasure in his way, you're probably going to find that that first H is capitalized, implying that, and God takes pleasure in man's ways, but that doesn't really make sense. Honestly, it should be the other way around of man takes pleasure in God's ways. So my Bible, once again, doesn't have any capitalized divine pronouns. So I would read it as a person's steps are established by the Lord, and a person takes pleasure in God's ways. Because once again, God's ways are higher than man's ways. Can I get an amen? So once again, we kind of look at this whole psalm here, and there's a theme of don't be jealous of all these wicked people who seem to be getting ahead. And so this is kind of where let's kind of talk about how the commandments kind of fit into the overall narrative of the Bible. Paul says that in the book of Galatians, he says that the law is a schoolmaster to those before they kind of like walk in, I guess you could say 100% freedom. So it's kind of like a kid. And a kid doesn't, not a kid, but like let's say a toddler, like a 4-year-old. A toddler doesn't really know good, right from wrong yet. And a toddler can't understand all the sophistication of right and wrong, what's all the gray areas in between. But what a child can understand is if I steal this item and I get scolded for stealing, then that must mean that stealing is bad. So that's kind of how a child thinks. It's black and white. This is right, this is wrong. And it's not until they're older that they can kind of discern all the gray areas in between. Well, Paul, he says that the law taught him that envy is wrong. And this is kind of what Psalm 37 is talking about here. And the hard part about envy is that it's very subtle, because you look at other people and you may not necessarily lust after what they want, but there's almost like a very small voice behind that saying like, well, but it would be nice. And you look at these people who are really succeeding, but you know that behind closed doors that they're actually not necessarily the most godly people, but it doesn't make sense that even though they're ungodly behind closed doors, they're somehow still prospering and living an abundant life publicly. And it can be almost disheartening because you're trying not to envy, but at the same time, as you look at yourself, it's kind of like, well, at the same time, it's almost like you get into this game of comparing yourself, and you're always going to be lacking compared to all these people who seem to be ahead of the game, quote unquote. But like it says here, all of these people, once again, everything that happens behind closed doors, the Lord sees everything. There is not a person who will have a secret that will not be exposed when, at the end of the day. Everything that is done in dark will one day come to light. There is no way around that. That's just how it works. That's how God set it up. And God enforces that. He enforces that standard of living. Is that there's no such thing as I'm going to keep this secret and no one's going to find out. It's going to happen because once again, that's just how it's laid out here. And when you kind of take that into perspective, it almost makes you kind of look at these people who are compromising on values to get ahead, and it almost makes you feel like Moses, where when Moses was put down by his family, he got down on his knees and started praying that they would receive mercy, because Moses knows that the judgment of the Lord is righteous. And he knows that this judgment, at one point or another, whatever this person is sowing, they have to reap the consequences of what they're sowing. And because Moses understood that, his first instinct was to get on his knees and pray for these people who are doing wrong things, because he didn't really want them. He loved them, and he didn't want them to really reap the things that they were sowing. And so what we can do is we can look at these people and just kind of recognize like, oh man, like you don't know what you're doing. Like you don't know how one day this is going to come and just bite you in the butt. And and it just kind of, there's like almost like a godly sorrow for them. And it's almost like you just want to like wake them up from whatever stupor they're in. And then you have people who willfully know that they're doing wrong, and they're doing what they can to exploit the whole system. And this is where this verse comes in, where it says, their swords will enter their own hearts and their bows will be broken. So what this means is that while you're living a godly life, you can have mercy on those who are ignorantly just doing things, who are compromising on their values, and you can intercede for them. And when you look at other people who are willfully just doing all these horrible things, you can have an assurance of your inside your heart of, Lord, you're the end all be all, and one day you're going to make this right. And it's not my job to take this into my hands and enforce justice. You're the one who enforces justice here. So now that solves two problems. But there's still a third problem. The third problem is that you're probably not living the abundant life that we talked about in Psalm 36. You may have risen to a point to where now you feel God's faithful love, but you look around and you're still kind of having to look at your bank account and budget a little more every week because the number in your bank account is kind of going down. Well, that's where Psalm 34:5 comes in. It says, commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. So what this means is that when we're talking about order, there's always a consistent theme of God honors a commitment of a person. That when a person takes a step, God honors that step and empowers that person. And so you look at this here, is it's like, okay, what's the end goal? For me, it was going to Bible college. So for me, my commitment was, God, no matter what happens, I am not going to pack up my bags and leave this place because it looks like I'm going to run out of money. That was my commitment. And God honored that commitment. So it says, commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. So it was after I made that commitment that God acted and brought the provision for me to continue through Bible college. But now we look at verse 4 and it says, take delight in the Lord and he will give you your heart's desires. So now this is kind of where I want to hunker down. I know we've been kind of talking for a while, but this is really important in the overall scheme of things. Because if we don't have this lesson down, we're always going to be shooting blindly at, I think this is the right thing. Because God is a God of order, it means that there has to be a pattern that we can follow to grow systematically in the kingdom of God. Because when you think about it, when you read the Bible as a whole, God didn't just do things and then string it together at the end. Rather, what you see is that from Genesis 1 to all the way to Malachi, I think it's 4, that God systematically reveals himself to man. And then Jesus is brought in strategically at the right time, at the right place. And then from there, there's almost like there's a call to find this pattern and realize that because God is not a respecter of persons, that if God works this way with people in the Bible, then that means that he will work the same way with me because he's not a respecter of persons. If God does not honor me the same way he honored people throughout the scriptures, then that means that God is a respecter of persons, and that would violate his character. So when we look at this, it says that he will give you the desires of your heart. And this is one of God's primary ways of growing us in the Christian walk. God reserves the right to put a desire in your heart, either to take away desire and put a new one in its place, or just put a desire in your heart. And a lot of us, we tend to overlook these desires as, well, it's what I want, but I don't really need it, so I'll just kind of ignore it. But when you realize that God is a God of order, there has to be a reason why he's putting this desire in your heart. Now, yes, there's a really cool harvest of joy and prosperity and everything from these desires coming to pass. But if you don't understand the whole purpose of that desire, you won't engage in the process of pursuing that desire. So a person, let's look at this over here. A person has a desire that's placed in their heart. Now, this desire, the reason why the person doesn't have that desire yet is because there's something in your heart that still doesn't trust God or trust Jesus as much as it probably should. And it's because of that lack of intimacy, lack of trust, that this desire hasn't come about. And so let's kind of look at an example here. So for me, it's a desire to go to Bible college. When God put that desire in my heart, it took almost 2 years before I finally acted on that desire. The only thing that kept me from acting on that desire was there was a fear that God wouldn't honor that desire, that God wouldn't give me the money I needed to go to Bible college. So that was a fear that kept me from receiving that desire in 2018. But there came a point at the end of 2019 where I finally got tired of imagining how great Bible college would be, and that's when I finally committed. But from 2018 to 2019, there was a growth process. And what that growth process involved was me saying, God, you put this desire in my heart to go to Bible college, and I am heartbroken that I can't do it because I don't think you can provide for me. And over the course of 2 years, Jesus slowly revealed his love more and more and more, and he constantly reassured me of, I can provide for you, I can provide for you, I can provide for you, I can provide for you. So what you see is that over the course of those 2 years, Jesus was healing the brokenness in my heart. There was a lack of trust that I had, primarily because there's a lot of people who took that trust and kind of stepped all over it. So Jesus had to go in there and rebuild those broken parts of my heart. And when my heart was finally fixed to the point to where I could finally trust Jesus enough, that's when you see that the desire was fulfilled. And that's when you see me finally committing to go to Bible college. And that's when you see the provision coming through. And if you remember from what we talked about yesterday, the heart is the gateway between the spirit and your soul. So because my heart was broken, I couldn't really access the fullness of life in my spirit because my heart was just, it's like a water faucet that wasn't working. I couldn't turn on the water. But over the course of those 2 years, because I refused to give up on that desire and I continually pursued that desire, Jesus had to honor that pursuit by repairing my heart. And by the time I reached the end of 2019, my heart had been healed enough to where I turned the faucet and now the abundant life of the Spirit came flowing into my soul. And that invigorated me to actually act and move towards that desire. So to kind of summarize this, there's a desire put in your heart and you haven't received that desire because there's something in your heart that's broken and it's keeping you from receiving the fullness of the Spirit. And as you start to pursue that desire, Jesus honors that pursuit by repairing and healing your broken heart. And then eventually there comes a point where your heart has been healed enough that everything that's in your spirit can finally flow through your heart into your soul. And that's usually when you see your desire come to pass. So going back to Psalm 37, you're kind of guarding against three things. You're guarding against envying people who have it better by compromising on their values. You're guarding yourself against people who are willfully exploiting everyone around them because you know God's going to bring everything they're doing into judgment one day. And lastly, you're able to grow on your own personal walk with Jesus because you have these desires in your heart that now you know that it was Jesus who put that desire in you, and he wants you to pursue that desire so he can heal your heart as you pursue that desire. And a byproduct of that healed heart is the desire comes to pass and you have more intimacy with Jesus. So it's a win-win for everyone. And that's why Psalm 37 is so cool, is because it ties so much together and it does it in such a beautiful way. it really shows you that the goodness of God is better than anything. That there's no point in compromising in your values to get ahead, because it's all going to come against you one day. There's peace in knowing that what God gives you, He doesn't hold it against you, that He's blessing you with these things. Because once again, He's the one who's manifesting Himself in your heart. And yeah, so that concludes Tuesday. It was a little long, but it's such a long psalm, so you almost have to take a long time to kind of go through it. So with that said, I'll see you guys on Wednesday, and I pray you guys have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.